In this tutorial, I'm going to demonstrate 6 examples of applying textures to photos in Photoshop. I'll walk through the images, each one of them right now, to give you an overview of what we're going to cover. Here's an image of a band that I applied a gritty texture to using the Add Noise filter. This is the after effect that we're looking at now. Here's the before image without the texture. Next, we're going to look at a photo of a train in which I've made it look more aged than it really is. If I turn off the texture, you can see that it's actually much smoother up here than it is with the addition of the texture. In this photo, I've started with a photo recently taken of Kylemore Abbey in Ireland and added this distressed look to make it look as though it was deteriorating for the last 100 years. In this image, I'm expanding the definition of the word texture to include lighting effects. It's a usage which is commonly encountered in the Photoshop and photo processing area. By turning off this, you can see the photo as it originally appeared, and this is with the addition of some lighting effects. You can see the effect applied using similar techniques as we used to apply textures. In this image, I've taken 2 images, one which is a photo of a model and another which is a photo of a notepaper background, and I'll combine the two in this image. And finally, we'll look at this image in which I've taken a photo of a lake. This was the original image. And then I've added a Photoshop watercolor layer and a texturizer layer to give it a sort of a painterly effect together with this canvas background effect. Okay, let's go back to the original image. And this is a case of using the Photoshop Add Noise effect to generate the texture entirely within Photoshop. So if I turn off the effect and look strictly at the original image, and if I zoom in, you can see the texture. This was shot at a relatively high ISO of around 1600, and you can see some noise in the image, and particularly in these dark areas. And I thought it didn't look bad, actually. I thought it kind of goes with this rough wood stage at this folk festival and the look of the singers. And I thought maybe I would play on that to increase the effect, to give something of like this. And it could be a stylistic effect, and I think it works. Now I'm going to walk through the process that I used to create this layer. So I'm going to turn off the finished effect, and I'm going to go back to this original layer. And what I've done in all these cases is to apply them as smart filters. The advantage of the smart filter approach is that it allows you to come back at any time and change the settings. This allows you a non-destructive workflow. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've selected my layer, then I'm going to come up here to the filter menu and choose Convert for Smart Filters. You'll notice that adds this little icon in the lower right corner that indicates that it is now a smart object. And if I apply a filter, as I'm going to do, it applies it as a smart filter. So I use the noise filter in Photoshop, the Add Noise filter, and I'm going to do that again. And when you do that, it pops up this dialog, which allows you to set the amount of noise that you want. Right now it's showing the value from the last time I ran the filter, which I had at around 16.5, which is way too much for any sort of artistic or stylistic effect. I can dial this down, although it's a little bit hard to use. It goes to such a high level that fine-tuning it by dragging the slider is difficult. I find it when I'm down at this level easier to use the arrow keys on the keyboard. You can use the up key to increase the value, the down arrow key to decrease the value. In this case, it's moving by a very small increment, so you can also use the shift up arrow and the shift down arrow key to move by a larger increment. I've chosen the uniform and monochromatic options as I thought they looked best for this particular photograph. You can experiment with these if you're trying this out and just see what looks best to you. Gaussian gives you a more random sort of a noise effect, whereas uniform keeps all the little noise particles about the same size. Monochromatic means the color doesn't change from one to the other, and if I increase the amount, you can clearly see what the difference is. So here it is with not monochromatic. In other words, the noise is being added in all the different colors, and here it is with monochromatic, whereas the noise is all just taken on by the shade of the image itself. And then when I say OK, it applies it as a smart filter, as we saw before. As I was saying, the advantage of using a smart filter is now it's applied non-destructively. I can come back at any time I want, and I can change this value. If I decide that I need more, I can add more or reduce it similarly. Now this is too much, but there's also another option when you apply as a smart filter. If you double click on this icon, it will pop up this dialog which allows you to set some blending options. In this tutorial series, I'm only going to be using the opacity slider, but by reducing this, I can reduce the effect of that high level of noise that I just applied. If I drag it all the way down to 0, then of course I get back to my original image with no noise applied. So I can go from a very small amount of noise to a very large amount of noise. And the effect of combining a large amount of noise with a reduced opacity is going to be a different effect than you'll get if you just use a lesser amount of noise. And you'll find that that's going to be true throughout this process of experimenting with textures and the different types of noise that you'll add and the different types of texture. You usually will get a different effect by applying it stronger or less strong and then adjusting the opacity to match. So that's how I generated this effect. Now we'll move on to the next image.